Hello there. Continuing with the series on military aviation, we come to a book written by a chap who is a real character. This is Spider Zero 07 by Mike Borlace. And he was a Fleet Air Arm pilot who flew fast jets. And he had signed up to fly for the Sultan of Oman's armed forces, and he was in London about to go away on contract, and he met a couple of Rhodesian girls, and things got really jolly, and he realised that there was no contest really between spending a few years out in the desert or in the bright lights of Salisbury. And so he changed and flew out to Rhodesia and signed up as an officer in the Rhodesian Air Force, expecting to fly jets there. They were flying Hunters. But when they found out that he had worked with the Royal Marines Commandos as a helicopter pilot, they needed heli-pilots, so they converted him over to that role. He did some time learning the Alouette 3 and started flying mainly on Fire Force operations. The Fire Force was a Rhodesian concept where, because of the terrorists were coming into the country from the neighbouring countries, and there was a system of OPs and patrols and pseudo operations by Zulu scouts, for example, to identify and locate the terrorists and guide a fire force attack onto them. And so they had these bases all over the place, fire force bases, which had a landing zone for helicopters, later a runway for Dakota. And they had the helicopters there and the actual troops. The backbone of Fire Force was Rhodesian Light Infantry. They were the real experts at it. Really young guys, and they got into a lot of contacts. So the helis would take a stick of four. There was usually 3 helicopters in a formation, plus a K car, which was the strike aircraft, and some sort of fixed wing aircraft as well. And later they developed the idea of dropping parachute troops, and they retrained the RLI as parachute infantry, and they started using the Dakotas as well. So they'd be guided onto the target by the OPs, and then they would do this vertical envelopment, and it was highly successful. It gained a lot of interest from other armies throughout the world, and the official historian of the US Marines call it the most efficient killing machine. So Mike Borlace flew a lot of operations in the armed helicopter, the K car, which had a Matra 20mm cannon fitted to it, and it would orbit the contact zone and act as airborne fire support. So it had a lot of experience doing this, and was in continuous operations, and he was awarded the Silver Cross of Rhodesia for it. During that time, the thing that had attracted him to Rhodesia, the opportunity to spend some time with the ladies there, manifested itself, and he had a sex life like a tomcat on reheat. And what he would do, if he wasn't actively engaged in an operation, he would often land at some farm where he had a girlfriend, leave his gunner to sunbathe in the shadow of the helicopter while he'd go in and dally with his lady friend. So he's quite a lad, really. And he even though he was awarded the second highest medal in Rhodesia, Silver Cross, he came into conflict with his senior officers quite often. And there was a story in the book where they found an AK-47 in his locker, and he was up on charges. And they pointed out how serious this was because they called it a weapon of war, or a terrorist weapon. Possessing a terrorist weapon was a potential life sentence. And so rather than accept a slap on the wrist, he said, no, you're charging me with something really, really serious. He said, I'm going to fight it. And he said, I want my say at a court martial. And he said, by the way, I was given the AK by the South African Recce's, the reconnaissance commando, who were operating in Rhodesia as D Squadron SAS. And it was all secret and clandestine and not to be broadcast, so they realized this was embarrassing. So in the end, they told him to behave himself, and they dropped the charges. But during that disciplinary episode, he was actually in the process of leaving the Air Force. His contract was up, and he joined the Salute Scouts and he went through selection, became an officer in Scouts, and actually was involved in some of their really secret activities, which was espionage in neighbouring countries. And unfortunately, he was arrested and spent time in the prison in Lusaka. But that is outside the scope of the book. And he is really scathing about what happened at the end in Rhodesia, where the intact Rhodesian Air Force was just handed over to the enemy. And he said it's unprecedented that that should happen. And he didn't think it was a particularly honourable thing. He was in Lusaka jail at the time. I really hope there's a sequel to the book, which covers his time in the Scouts. He only mentions it in a sentence or two. And also the things he did later when he was released from prison. And he was working for KMS, the military contract company and so on, in places like Nicaragua and Sri Lanka. Had a tremendous career, and certainly deserves a sequel. And if it comes out, I'll recommend that one as well. So really good read.